Women have made huge progress in Ireland over the last century, but just how equal is the society we've created today? Have women been recognised enough in our history and in our public spaces? With an increasing spotlight on gender issues and gender equality, the Royal Irish Academy on Dublin's Dawson Street has chosen to commemorate and celebrate amazing Irish women. The RIA is a home of academic excellence for some of our greatest minds, both male and female. But a walk around Academy House tells a different story. The Royal Irish Academy was formed in 1785 as a learned society promoting the sciences and the humanities. It's a remarkable selection of some of Ireland's best academics, committing their lives to finding answers to questions that affect us all.
Important research can either have an impact within a couple of years or more likely 20 years or sometimes 40 years. Often it's something brilliantly impactful, like people working in cancer, in legal and philosophical spheres.
Past members of the Academy include Nobel Prize winners like W.B. Yeats and Erwin Schrödinger. One of their most famous presidents was William Rowan Hamilton.
People at Space Centre in NASA use quaternion algebra, which he discovered in 1843, to get satellites into space today.
Gender equality is a core principle of the RIA, so they're concerned that only 1 in 4 people in Ireland working in the science, technology, engineering and maths sectors are women. This concern is shared by global professional services company Accenture.
We had a meeting in Academy House with Porg Dempsey and we were discussing the systemic challenge that is gender equality, the need for role models. And I look up at these beautiful paintings and I literally just had a sinking feeling and I just voiced out loud, there are no women on the walls.
Of course, I'd known that forever. You know, I've worked in the Academy for over 20 years, but I'd forgotten. And it annoyed me. You know, I was annoyed and I was irritated with myself because I have been conscious of the fact that it's not acceptable, that it does give a bad impression of the Academy and it does give a bad impression of Irish intellectual life.
Art tells us so much about what we value as a society, about who is welcome, about who fits in. Art communicates our expectations about gender. So in a very public forum, if we're leaving women out of it, then actually we're perpetuating women being less visible and indeed their work being less known, less carried on to future generations and in many ways less valued.
It's not only in the Academy that you don't see female faces. You go to any public building, public university, you will not see the portraits of women looking down at you. It's a cross-sectional issue and we want to start the conversation.
Women on Walls is a campaign by Accenture in partnership with the Royal Irish Academy to make women leaders more visible through a series of commissioned portraits. For the first time in its 230-year history, paintings of female academic leaders will go on the walls of the Royal Irish Academy.
Women on Walls is a wonderful collaboration between the Academy and Accenture to commission 5 portraits, 4 individual portraits of the first 4 women who were elected to the Academy in 1949 and 1 group portrait of 8 European Research Council grant holders.
It was a long commissioning process. We invited applicants. We got a huge number of submissions, but it was very quickly apparent that there were 2 artists that the committee liked. Vera Clute, who won the Hennessy Prize, was chosen to do the portrait of the 4 female academics from 1949, and Blaise Smith was chosen to paint the 8 women scientists who are contemporary scientists today.
Vera Clute is a Hennessy Prize-winning artist. Born in Germany, she learned her craft in Ireland, and her work is multidisciplinary, taking in animation, sculpture and painted portraiture.
I like doing portraits a lot, and I'm into science. So I guess I could relate to the women straight away that way. Just when I saw the ad, they all had good faces, interesting faces for portraits, which is important. The whole political aspect that it's women, it's important as well, but foremost I'm an artist, so it needs to be interesting for me. It should be completely normal that these women are getting a portrait done. It shouldn't even be special. So I know that it is, but it's kind of sad that it is.
The 4 pioneering historical members of the Royal Irish Academy, whose portraits Vera will paint, are botanist Phyllis CLINCH, art historian Françoise Henry, physicist SHEILA Tinney, and early Irish scholar ELEANOR KNOTT. Together, the four became the first female members of the Royal Irish Academy in 1949.
Our four women are part of a privileged minority. In 1949, women could not sit on juries. They could not continue to work in the public service and a lot of the private sector after they were married. They could not work in certain industries if it was to the detriment of male employees. They could not inherit their own homes as married women. So there's a serious cloak of quite deep oppression hanging over Irish women at this point. For these women to reach the heights they did within the fields that they occupied was extraordinary, and how difficult it was for them to become as preeminent in their fields as they did.
It's not okay that the stories of the women of yesterday have neither been told, nor did those women get the due recognition for their incredible scientific and educational discoveries. So we wanted to correct the canon.
The other artist chosen is Blaise Smith, a leading figurative artist in Ireland. He's won many awards and public commissions and has been selected in numerous juried exhibitions, notably the RHA Annual in Dublin and the BP Portrait Award at the National Portrait Gallery in London. Blaise will create one group portrait of 8 of today's leading female scientists, who've each received hard-won grants from the European Research Council, helping them bring great scientific ideas to life.
I am delighted to do this painting because it is a marker of a quantum shift, a shift in society. This would have been unthinkable in 1916 and absolutely unbelievable 100 years before that. So to have 8 women, clearly masters of their professions, now in a painting that is the traditional way to mark a great moment, you know, it's a huge privilege for me to be asked to do that.
Blaise's subjects come from disparate scientific backgrounds. Emma Teeling studies bats for insights into human ageing. Sarah McCormack is looking at ways to improve the efficiency of solar energy systems for the Irish climate. Deborah Lafer is devising new ways to collect area remote sensing data. Aoife McLysett is using an evolutionary approach to understanding our genomes in the context of human disease. Maria McNamara is a paleontologist working on the evolution of animal colours and feathers in dinosaurs. Lydia Lynch is looking at how the immune system affects people with obesity and diabetes. Catriona Crowe is working to gain critical insights into the role of mechanics in cardiovascular diseases. Aoife Gowan is an expert in hyperspectral imaging, exploring the role that water plays in biological interactions. These 8 women are leaders in their fields, undertaking important research to improve daily lives through science.
We want to create role models and profile role models because the work of these female scientists is extraordinary and wide-ranging, and we want to acclaim that.
I'm proud that it's being done while I am the Chief Executive. It's great that it's done. People are accusing me of feminising the Academy, and I don't mind being accused of that at all.
Before the artists start painting, they must get to know their subjects. But for Vera Clute, it's not that simple. There is detective work to be done.
The biggest challenge with the project is that none of the subjects or sitters are alive anymore. So I'm spending a lot of time trying to find photographs, and luckily there's more and more turning up. Usually I'd meet the sitter before and get to know them a little bit, just to get a sense of what kind of person they are and what's a typical expression and all of that. So none of that is possible with this project. I suppose in a way I thought it would be easier if they're not around anymore. They can't complain, but I feel really obliged to get them right because, you know, it's bad enough they didn't get this done while they were alive. So I really don't want to do them another huge injustice by just getting their faces completely wrong. So I didn't think I would feel about it this way, but I actually do. With my proposal, I said I wanted to bring elements from their field of expertise into the background, to turn them sort of into a pattern. So I had to look into what they actually did as well. Françoise Henry was an art historian. I think she went around all of Ireland on a bicycle looking at ruins and the stone crosses. Luckily enough, if someone specialises in art, there's a lot of visual material, so I was just flicking through the books there that she published, and in one of the books there were these drawings where she's sort of constructing these geometrical designs. So I thought it would be nice to use something that she actually made herself. I only had this picture of her, so I was just zooming into the pixels trying to figure out a face there, and it's almost impossible. So the first drawing I did of her, I think it looks nothing like her, but luckily enough, someone emailed me images, which was great.
Born in Paris in 1902, Françoise Henry was a Celtic art specialist and archaeologist. In 1926, a chance visit to Ireland was to cement her passion for early Irish Christian art. In 1965, she established Ireland's first department of art history at University College Dublin. Her seminal work, The Book of Kells and Its Decoration, was published in 1974.
Françoise Henry was the grand mistress of Irish art in this country, lecturing in UCD but also writing on the subject in a number of great books such as Irish Art, which appeared in 3 volumes in English in 1965 to 1970, and her final great contribution was on the subject of the Book of Kells, which had never really been treated in the same way and to the same great extent. I think she was a romantic. Her soul was really delighted with the products of stonework that we had here, the early Christian stonework, the crosses, decorated stones, of which there was nothing comparable. She was the first of her kind to be elected to the Academy. I think that must have been not only just a great honour, but also a feather in her cap. And I would like to think that it helped her to get on in UCD, but it still took a further 16 years before she was really placed in charge of a department in UCD after she was elected a member of the Academy. I don't think she was honoured enough in her day, but it's very much worthwhile remembering because the value of her work still stands. She was the one who really put Ireland on the artistic map of Europe, and I think it's great that the Academy is now honouring her name. But it's very difficult to bring out the character of someone whom you've never actually met. But that, I think, is the genius of an artist, and I can only hope that Vera Clute has succeeded in bringing out the character of this very remarkable lady.
I started thinking about it a lot more, the way that probably there is a lot more inequality than I'm aware of. I might be in a bit of denial because I always think, you know, in this day and age, it should be completely normal that women get the same pay, the same chances and get their portrait on the wall, but it probably isn't the case. I went on an airplane with my 5-year-old daughter and she was looking at me and she's saying, "Oh, but the pilot is a girl." And I was absolutely shocked that she was shocked that it was a girl because, you know, I thought I would have raised her that that'd be normal, that it was a woman flying the plane. And it just showed that if even a 5-year-old thinks that's unusual, that's bad.
Like Vera, artist Blaise Smith is also tasked with painting the images of extraordinary women. He'll paint a group portrait of 8 contemporary female scientists. But unlike Vera, he's able to meet his subjects, which brings its own challenges.
The approach that I originally proposed was really just to consult with the people who were the sitters. I met the scientists in the Royal Irish Academy in May, and we discussed how they'd like to be seen.
I'm looking at the Vanity Fair one of the woman in the green dress and in the...
They look like they're all the same.
Yeah. That's what I think about any exhibits in general.
We're not actually lying around on
it.
Nonchalant. You know.
Yeah. Now, I don't think we should be going here really.
No.
I mean, what I really object to this is the way we sort of flounced around as a kind of oh, you know, I just fell over here. As people, look, it's so unrealistic, you know. I painted my own wife, you know, and she's standing just hands down facing straight out. It's not a lady draped over a chair in a decorative.
Yeah, it's presenting yourself and saying, this is me. Yeah.
Very much like front on and like, you know, boom, there you go. So it's
That's great. We're scientists, we're trying to understand how life works, how the natural world actually functions and works, even from, you know, tiny cells all the way up to the sun. If you could maybe bring that in, that we're trying to understand the processes of life.
You arrived and said you wanted to hold the sun.
We don't have to have the sun.
No, I really like it. I'm like, yeah, I love that. I do. And then that kind of opens the door for the rest of you.
There was a decision that everybody holds an object or holds something that represents their field of study. But the problem to solve is really just how to depict these people who are from disparate backgrounds really, and, you know, are different people, put them all together in one image and make them all look both at home in it and separate and individual within that. And I felt from the beginning that if any of them were sitting down, that would create not exactly a hierarchy, but differences, you know, between one person and the next. So I was very keen on saying to them, well, how about if you're all standing? And, you know, through discussion, really, we came up with this idea of them all standing in a row, like superheroes. And one of them said, yeah, it would look like we're there to make a difference, you know? And there is that kind of echo in it as well.
Lydia Lynch is looking at how anti-tumour immune cells can protect against obesity and diabetes.
Going to college in the first place was a bit of a challenge. I had a baby when I was 16, but I had a really nice group of friends and neighbours and everybody that helped me, and so that's how it was possible. I just fell in love with immunology. I just loved the whole idea that we have this immune system in our bodies that we can use to protect us from cancer and viruses. So then I did a PhD in immunology and then a postdoc in Harvard. I mean, my husband's been great. He's so supportive of my career. He's an electrician, and he feels that, you know, in the bigger picture, that to be an immunologist contributes more to the world. So he feels that my job is important, obviously his is as well, but he was happy to give up his job in Dublin to move over to Boston to look after the kids, and he did look after them full-time for a year while we got set up there. To me, it doesn't make sense that there's not as many women at the higher level in science, or women in science, as men. It just doesn't make sense, because women are just as good at science and are just as ambitious often, and I don't see how being a woman would stand in your way. But there obviously is obstacles, and there obviously is reasons that there's not as many women in science.
Blaise has used photographs to sketch out an outline of the 8 scientists, but he will paint each of their faces from life.
Now, you're the first down here, so I'm hoping that if I stand you down there beside the window, that it'll be the same lighting, you know?
That face is good though. That's the way I look in the pictures that I like.
I see every portrait that I do as a collaboration between me and the sitter. It's not really just my painting. I'm trying to present them in the way that they want to be presented to the world, while at the same time presenting them in such a way that their nearest and dearest also recognise them.
My kids will just text me, good luck with your posing.
Oh my gosh, wow.
Be critical.
My eyes look strange.
Okay.
I went to Siberia 6 months pregnant in November in -40 conditions to get some fossils.
I work, but I can only work because my husband takes the share that he does. That's the only way it actually works.
The first time I had ever heard about this idea, I was sitting in my office and the phone rang and I picked it up and said, hello, this is Royal Irish Academy. I'd like to ask you, would you be interested in having your portrait painted? And I was like, sorry, excuse me, what? So your portrait, I said, you'll have to tell me that again. I think there must be something wrong with the line.
I just want to check what colour your eyes are.
If you weren't painting, I think you were looking at me funny.
Yeah, I am looking funny.
you need time to work with your subject and get to know us and get a sense, you couldn't push out a first-class portrait in half an hour.
NCAD, I came out and didn't paint for 10 years because, like anybody young, I was quite not very self-assured,
Yes,
and had I begun painting in Dublin, it would have been about a week before some friend of mine who was probably in NCAD or another artist arrived up and go, what are you doing that for?
Yeah.
So it makes it very hard to proceed without getting yourself very quickly into an intellectual knot, you know what I mean, about, well, what's this for?
It is great, we're all different and we all have a style, but with that does come pressure, and I think men don't have that pressure.
And already, do you see that? I think that makes a difference.
Yeah.
And I mean, in a lot of ways, I think women have great latitude in society and more
yes
freedom.
Yes and no. Even if you look within Irish universities, it's typically men that are full professors, men that are the senior lecturers, and the bottom ranks are usually populated by the females. Now this is very interesting because in my first year research groups, our students are predominantly female. But what seems to happen is that the females do the undergraduate degrees in science, and then it's this weeding out that seems to happen. And so by the time you get to the top, it's typically men and not women. And I still see this. And sometimes you'd look around, you'd realise, I'm hanging around with all the boys.
Emma Teeling is looking at bats and human ageing.
So bats don't age, they seem to have slowed down aging, and right now we're trying to understand what they're doing to achieve this extraordinary feat. And that potentially we could then use that to slow down and halt aging in humans. I went to an all-girls school, but I never realised there were things that potentially I couldn't do. I never ever thought that girls weren't as good as boys. I went into molecular phylogenetics, so sequencing genes to understand the evolutionary history of organisms. That's what I did for my PhD. There was never any gender difference, or I didn't perceive it anyway. And I did well in that environment. And then I went to UCD and I started my career as a lecturer. And again, things were going fine until I got pregnant. And then when I got pregnant, I realized, it's much more difficult for me than for my male colleagues.
We have very robust maternity protection laws in place in Ireland, but what remains the reality is that the time at which it's critical to build a career is often the time at which women will have to take time out to have children. That can be a difficulty in terms of career progression. But, obviously we have to change workplaces to ensure that this doesn't disadvantage women. So there's all sorts of different ways of doing that. So our 2 weeks paid paternity leave, that is just a very recent innovation, while it's still very minimal compared to women's entitlement to maternity cover, it does for the first time acknowledge that men are parents too, and that their role as parents should be recognised and acknowledged in the workplace.
SHEILA Tinney was the first Irish woman to receive a PhD in mathematical sciences. A contemporary of Einstein, she was widely recognised as one of the best physicists in the country. She developed the first maths courses on quantum mechanics at UCD and taught the subject to generations of students there.
One of the things that struck me when we were gathering photographs for this project was how on the reverse you had Professor this and Doctor that, and you had Miss Tinney, even though she was a doctor as well. That was how she was listed, Miss Power as she was at that stage. Miss S. Power, not Dr. S. Power. It was a long time before she was actually made an associate professor in UCD, and certainly we remember people saying that that should have happened years earlier. That said, Mummy never complained or saw herself as some kind of a victim. There is one professor emeritus who has a lovely story about how she was being passed over and how Mummy said, yes, that's all very unfair, but what you need to do now is keep that big smile on your face and sit down and write another book, and then they won't be able to pass you over any longer. I think she just took it in her stride, that would be her phrase, that maybe if she hadn't been a woman, she would have had more recognition and earlier.
In order to try to reflect SHEILA Tinney's life in one painting, artist Vera Clute has arranged to meet the scientist's children so as to uncover a sense of her character firsthand.
It's great to see such an age range. Just trying to figure out what age you portray someone.
That's an interesting question.
Any age, but I suppose since she didn't change that much, it's kind of easier to find sort of a middle ground.
And the hair was always big. It was like a halo around her there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Yes.
I could see that from the photos. She looks very approachable and not arrogant or anything, which, you know, she could have been with the success that she had.
Absolutely.
I also like this photograph because
Yes.
she's between two very famous and noted physicists, Paul Dirac,
Yes.
and this I think is Arthur Eddington.
Yes.
So it's wonderful to see her there
She
in the
looks,
middle of the two.
I don't know, she looks a bit shy or something there.
Yes.
I don't think that's reflective of her personality, is it?
I think she had that side. Yeah, we're both agreeing. We're both agreeing on that.
Yeah, I would have thought she was quite confident because in most of the photos she has a very steady gaze, doesn't she? And she doesn't have that awkward camera face. Some people they put in an awkward smile because they're insecure.
Yes. But I think she may have been very confident and comfortable in the mathematical, in the science setting. So in that kind of setting, she may have felt this is part of the whole process.
How do you think she'd feel about getting her portrait done now for this purpose? Would she be comfortable with it?
Well, she
Or
had
would
that.
she be happy
She had
about
a little expression that she used to use. It's kind of disappeared now. I think she would have been tickled pink by having her portrait painted.
The thing I get wrong most is the distance between the eyes. So it's best if I start with the eyes and then I make everything work around it. The son and daughter, Hugh and Deirdre, it's just nice getting their perspective. I'd never get to meet her, but I suppose it's the closest I'd get to getting to know her. It's not so much about the information that's exchanged. It's more about maybe even getting a sense what they're like, because I think meeting the children just sort of gives me a sense of that family. And I suppose that will be reflective of the mother then, in a way.
With women underrepresented in our history and our public spaces, the Royal Irish Academy, a home of academic excellence, has chosen to celebrate amazing Irish women and correct an historical imbalance within its walls. Two of Ireland's leading artists have been commissioned to paint 12 female academic leaders from today and yesterday.
We want our daughters to believe they can be anything they want to be, not because we tell them they can be, but because they see it reflected from society back at them.
For the first time in 230 years, the walls of the RIA are set to tell a different story. Artist Blaise Smith has been commissioned to create one group portrait of 8 of today's leading female scientists. His subjects come from a wide range of disciplines. Aoife Gowan works in the field of hyperspectral imaging.
From the Royal Irish Academy, she rang me up. She's like, well, we're doing this painting of women who got the ERC award and I'd like you to be part of it. And I was like, yes, absolutely, that sounds amazing. Like, it was definitely one of the coolest offers I've ever got to do something.
And it was free.
And it was free, yeah. Exactly. Oh, I thought it sounded like a really fun project, and I mean, I suppose I was surprised to be asked because I'm starting off in my career as a scientist, and it's kind of early days. I hope that it's well, I just had a baby girl, I suppose, and for her, when she grows up, I hope that it will be normal to see paintings of women alongside paintings of men, women on walls, equal representation of gender in academia and that kind of thing. For you, Blaise, I mean, from the paintings that you've done, what's the proportionality, male to female?
Generally, it's 3 to 1. You know.
3 to 1.
You know, the type of people who are commissioning portraits are often men in their 60s, you know, which is great. And but the women's portraits I've done would have been commissioned, say, by their husbands and things like that. And
interesting.
There's a lot of ground to be made up, you know.
Yeah. I think the nice thing is as well that we're all fairly individual, as you can see from the painting.
Yeah.
And there is no kind of stereotype scientist or professor or whatever, you know. It's showing the next generation that we're, you know, we're just normal, normal people. Hear the baby outside.
That's it, your time's up.
Artist Vera Clute has been commissioned to paint the first 4 female members of the Royal Irish Academy. Her research into the lives and work of each of these extraordinary women is helping to influence her paintings and the choices she's making.
ELEANOR, she's a Celticist, so she was doing a lot of work on early Irish literature. I started off doing drawings, and this is the original drawing that I did. It's mainly based on this older photograph of her, but there she has quite a tense look in her face. It's not quite a smile, so I wanted to change that a bit. And these were also different stages. There she's obviously, she almost looks like a teenager, and there she's, I don't know, 50? It's hard to say. I suppose once you have a few images, you can sort of start recognizing what's a typical expression. She did a lot of work on the Irish dictionary, and I ended up using these word slips to sort of again create a pattern behind her. So that was the colour draft for her painting.
Early Irish scholar Eleanor Knott's meticulous research was crucial to the creation of the first Irish language dictionary. Her portrait will be displayed to the public, and for some, seeing her face again will have a special significance.
My parents died young. My mother firstly, sadly, and then my father some years later. But my aunt Nellie, because that was really her name, she certainly put aside all the academic side to be very, very kind to me. She clearly loved me as if I was a son, and I also loved her. I think it was unusual for someone to have reached such heights in academia as she did as a woman, but there is no doubt whatsoever about how very, very clever she was. It's great that she should be acknowledged. Putting a painting up, it mean an awful lot to me to just see her exhibited in that way. She would never have been seeking anything like that, never. She'd have been just happy to get on with whatever had to be done or should be done, in the same way as she had this huge care for myself.
Academia had its own patriarchal structures. If you look back at our universities here at that time, there were hardly any women in positions of authority in either the sciences or the humanities. So that reflects again the broader patriarchy in the society, that academia did not deem women in some cases as being fit for advancement. However, it was still a more liberal environment than a lot of what was going on in the rest of the country at the time. And if you were prepared to put up with all sorts of stuff, which women still do in lots of places, you could advance and become eminent in your own field.
I'm in Trinity and I'm teaching, which means that I'm there with, first-year students who just finished school, right up to students who were doing their PhD. And sometimes they do actually say to me that it's nice to see a woman who's doing the career and who's in it, because there are very few of us. There's something in that. It's very hard to imagine yourself in a job if you can't see anybody even a little bit like you in it. There was an interesting study done a few years ago. So I call it the Jennifer and John study, because what they did was they made a mocked-up CV that was identical, so the same experience, the same grades, the same study, whatever. and they put a name on the top of it, and one of them was Jennifer and the other one was John, and they sent these CVs out to people and asked them, would you appoint this person to a job, and what salary would you give them? It was represented as a mentorship exercise. And John was more hireable and would get higher pay than Jennifer, even though they had the identical CV. Men and women both did this, so both men and women had this unconscious bias. And so I think one thing you need to do is be aware that this exists. And I think the best people in this regard are the ones who are not so certain that they could never possibly have a bias. The ones who go, you know, we all realize that we might have a bias, and just every now and again ask yourself, am I being fair? Are the things I'm looking for, am I kind of being distracted by maybe irrelevant details? So that's one thing, just being aware of the fact that it's possible to have a bias that you're not conscious of.
In 1949, the bias against women in Ireland was plain to see, which makes the achievements of Vera's subjects so much more remarkable.
I mean, they must have been quite determined to start with if they got where they got despite being women at the time. PHYLLIS CLINCH was a biologist or a botanist. She always looked really friendly and warm and, you know, a really nice smile in all the photographs, which is rare. I usually don't like doing portraits of people smiling, but in her case, I don't think it would have been a reflection of her if I had done her with a serious face, because I think she was just that kind of person.
Botanist Phyllis Clinch's extraordinary research paved the way for disease-resistant crops, including the potato. She was a much-loved figure in her department and was a famously kind and nurturing teacher.
To my brother and me, she was anti-Phil, but she was also anti-Phil to everybody in UCD. Even people that weren't in the science faculty knew her as anti-Phil. She worried about people, she worried about students that were finding it hard to get through their exams. She did everything she could to help them. She devoted her life to her work, and she made incredible breakthroughs, which led to her getting a PhD while still in her 20s. The work that she did benefited potato producers all over the world. I think she would be quietly pleased with the Women on Walls project, and she would certainly see the reason for it, and she would have been supportive, while rather embarrassed at having her picture on the wall, let's put it that way.
There's another about a week in this. Right now I'm painting Aoife's dress in here, and I'm just enhancing the contrast from the earlier coat by adding dark, thin oil paint here on top of that earlier layer to make it even lusher and richer. So this is a highly contrived and managed image in which everything is built up layer by layer, so there aren't really mistakes, there's just mapping out the next step carefully. So it's much more like a craft, you know, than something with flair or anything like that. All I'm doing is I'm just taking each small step, and each time I move it forward a bit. So nothing could go wrong, short of like the studio catching fire, you know, but basically, no. And I'd be out here to get this out as a priority. The scientists themselves had a big hand and very welcome contribution into how they themselves would like to be portrayed, you know. So it's as much their painting as it is my painting, because I'm just executing it in a sense, but they've, you know, discussed at length how they want to be perceived and seen, you know, far into the future.
Whether a cancer cell, a DNA genome or a 3D model, Blaise's painting illustrates the wide scope of research that's undertaken in Ireland.
In the painting, I'm holding a heart, and the reason for that is that my work is focused on the cardiovascular system and optimising the design of
heart valves that can be implanted in a minimally invasive way. In 50 years, I hope that there'll be less of a focus on what the women in the picture are wearing, which is often the focus sometimes around women in the public eye, and I think that's a shame if that's the focus. I'd hope that the focus will be on what the people in the painting, what we've all achieved. What we don't want to do is push young girls into the area of engineering and sciences because we want to up numbers there. The important thing is that women will feel they have just as much chance of succeeding in these areas, that they feel the opportunities are open to them in the same way as they are to men, and therefore that they think about it just as easily and readily as men do or young boys do.
Vera and Blaise are almost finished their paintings, and this project has really had a big impact on each of them.
I'm quite happy with them. The closer it's getting to the deadline now, the more nervous I get about it though. But generally I have a good gut feeling whether something is working or not. And this time I actually like them, and I'm fairly critical most of the time. It is good that they get acknowledgement and they get it publicly. I'm just thinking of my two daughters. You know, it's good for them to know that people get recognised for their achievements and women get recognised for their achievements, and that they can do physics or, you know, God knows what, and they will get recognition for it. Would have been nice to do them from life or at least meet them before. And I suppose because they are all dead now and they had their careers many years ago, so it's going back in time and sort of doing them justice now. Well, they do now what should have been done back then. Whereas for contemporary scientists now, there shouldn't be no excuse why they shouldn't be up on the walls. You know, it shouldn't take a special project to do that. They should just get it anyway. I wouldn't have wanted to swap with Blaise. Like, I only applied for doing these 4 women. I think it just needs to be, for me, the sort of one-on-one. So, no, I don't envy Blaise. I'm looking forward to see his painting, though.
It's just finished. I've done as much as I can to it, or as much as is needed. So, roll on the launch and we'll see what everybody else makes of it. I'm thinking of social historians. That's who I'm worried about. You know, will they get the information that they need from this image, and will it give them a sense of our life and times? So it'll be really interesting in 50 years and extremely interesting in 100 years. We're at a major cultural change from, say, 1900 or 1916. In 1916, women did not even have the vote at that stage. So it's taken us 100 years to get this far. It's not far enough, but it is the middle of a huge revolution in society. So that's what we're recording here, really. You know, I fundamentally think this painting will end up in the National Gallery in about 300 years because of what it's of. So that's a great privilege, you know.
Brought together by the painting, these 8 women are destined to share a future beyond their own lifetimes.
It's a great honour to be in the painting with all these wonderful scientists, not only because of their science, but also of the fact that they're all mothers as well. So for me, just starting out as a mother, it's very inspirational to see that you can achieve so much in your career and have a family at the same time. And I think that's another aspect of this project. It shows that science and having a family are not incompatible. You can do both.
With the paintings now finished, Vera has chosen a simple wooden frame with a gilt finish, one that is built to last.
It is a nice thought to think that maybe my grandchildren will walk in there and think, oh, Granny did that. or something like that. Do you know? It's a nice idea.
I think that's going to look well. With the two splines on the side.
Oh yeah. Charlotte thinks so anyways.
By 4.
Yeah.
I'm going to take it into my framer. The whole thing will weigh about 60 kilos by the time we're finished, so it'll be very sturdy. And that's part of my plan as well, in the sense that it all increases the longevity of the painting, you know, the sheer physical strength of its materials and so on.
I think in the future people will look back at this period of our history and see that there was a determination to resist sexism, discrimination, and gender bias. This will be seen as a period where women, younger women in particular, were being encouraged to aim high and, you know, not to feel that they had to put any kind of limitations on what they hoped to do, that they could fulfill whatever ambitions they wanted to do. But this might also be seen as a period where some people believed it was a post-feminist era, that the battles that were fought in the 1960s and the 1970s were largely won, that they didn't need to be fought again. But, you know, there are others who will completely challenge that. It'll still be seen that there is so much that can be contested and there is so much that can be fought over.
I'm really heartened by the sort of initiatives we're seeing, like Women on Walls, which I think is great. And there's definitely a real dynamic now, a much more overt and visible sense of gender awareness. It's young women saying, well, actually feminism was supposed to bring about major change and we're still not seeing it, so we're going to get active again.
I do think we're at a period in time where a lot of people really do want to drive a change. If you look at just one organisation like the Royal Irish Academy, you go from having no women on the walls, now there will be 12 powerful women represented on the walls of the Academy. And I think that's a great statement about women and men working together to really re-look at the inequality that exists, both in the past and in the present, and hopefully creating a different future.
For the first time in its 230-year history, portraits of female academic leaders now hang in the Royal Irish Academy. The Women on Walls project has come to life.
So it looks amazing. Whenever I saw it, it was just a sketch of me and a few of the others, and just to see it all come together, pretty impressive.
Tonight, we mark this centenary year by celebrating 12 outstanding women in these 5 stunning portraits.
If the past year has taught us anything about the state of gender equality in Ireland and globally, it is that the struggle for equality is far from over.
I found it very emotional when I looked at the paintings, because it's about all of that exclusion that's been there for so long, and it's wonderful to see a very historic and a very celebrated institution here reclaiming their own history of women, and I think a lot of other institutions could do the same.
Women on Walls, it's a simple idea, and like many great ideas, I think it's a simple idea that just brings to life something that's a real issue. The way forward is through inclusion, proper inclusion.
I think it makes us look like real people, and I think that's what Irish people need to see. You know, we're female scientists, we look like real people, we're here in Ireland doing really good science.
It's really important that it is both the 8 contemporary scientists, which is so powerful, and to see their children here today responding to the painting as well is really special, but also the 4 original members who were elected to the Academy 70 years ago. Very powerful to see that redress of the imbalance that was there.
How did you find working for photographs?
If you look at a photograph and the face is the size of a thumb,
Yes.
just imagine you're doing a portrait from that.
We know a person through their life, you live close to them, you don't notice them evolving. And looking there, I see the mum of various different ages there, you know, which is fascinating, but I like it very much.
It's actually quite an emotional day. Seeing everybody here, seeing all the women here, seeing the families of the first 4 female members of the Academy, looking at the artists relate to members of the family. So actually, it feels a much more personal project. Now you see the women and the pictures.
It's very moving, really, seeing the women on the walls of the Royal Irish Academy for the first time. And I really hope that children in Ireland and all around the world will have an opportunity to see these beautiful paintings and to look at them and say, this could be me.